What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com coming back at y'all today with a post-game reaction to Texas's 40-14 win over number 24 Kansas. Number 3 Texas moves to 5-0 and 2-0 in the Big 12 on the season after what looks to be a more convincing win than it was for most of the game. Granted, Texas again pulled away in the second half. Nonetheless, a good win for Texas. Again, you get kind of really tested at home by a physical Kansas squad that was finding ways to get things done and capitalizing from time to time, but really hanging around because of some missed opportunities from Texas that just seemed like they kept happening over and over and over again in the first maybe 35 minutes of this game. Kansas moves to 4-1, 1-1 in the Big 12 on the season. This is not only their first defeat of the season, but their worst loss, I believe, since their loss to Texas last season in Lawrence. But yeah, I want to give some of my post-game takeaways, my reaction, some game notes, all that good stuff as usual. There's a lot of talking points for Texas. You got Red River next weekend, so you got a big game coming up here soon. But still a lot to take away from this win as well. First and foremost, I think we should mention some of the injuries in this game for both sides. Kansas. Right before kickoff, you have the news come out that Jalen Daniels isn't going to be playing in this game. Jason Bean, their backup quarterback, gets the start. He started, I think this is now 7 games the last 2 seasons. But Jalen Daniels is out because of back issues. I know that's kind of been something plaguing him. He missed the season opener against Missouri State because of that, but really no indications that he was limited or going to be out for this game, leading up until game time. But obviously a huge absence here for Kansas. They're not able to really get much of anything going through the air outside of a deep ball connection that was for 50-plus yards between Jason Bean and Trevor Wilson in the first half. Most of their production on offense came on the ground, but Texas's defense really set the tone most of the way in this game. On the Texas side, as far as injuries are concerned, the 2 big ones, and I think really the only 2 from this game that I know of. First one, and the most significant one, junior tight end J.T. Sanders. He went down in the first half. Looks like a Kansas defender rolled up on his ankle. He ended up missing the rest of the game. He was seen in a walking boot post-game. Had to head into the locker room. I believe that was just before halftime. I don't know what his status will be heading into Red River, but it doesn't look great if he's in a walking boot right now. But I'm not a doctor, so we'll just continue to monitor that situation moving forward. But he obviously did not return after suffering that injury. Gunnar Helm got the starting reps. Also, you saw Juan Davis a little bit in this game. The other injury was Ryan Watts. He also suffered a lower body injury. I believe he left the game in the first half as well. He was ruled out, did not return. Less clear on his status moving forward. I think Texas has a little bit more cornerback depth than they do at tight end, so I'm not as worried about Watts being out, but he's still an incredibly important starter for Texas on defense. He was kind of the one corner position that you knew he was the guy heading into the season when you're coming out of fall camp. And so we'll continue to monitor their status moving forward. But like I said, after they had both left the game, they were ruled out, both lower body injuries. So we'll see, what Sark has to say post game and what that will look like moving forward. But Texas usually plays it pretty close to the chest with a lot of these injuries, so don't know how much information they're going to be willing to dispel moving forward. But yeah, let's talk about some other game notes here before I get into my takeaways. So, Texas really controlled this game because of what they were able to do on the ground. I'll mention a lot about Jonathon Brooks in this game, but his efforts, along with C.J. Baxter Jr., the true freshman running back, they helped Texas rush for over 330 yards, 336 in this game compared to just 124 for Kansas. This is a Kansas team that has 2 really solid backs between Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw, but after some issues with Texas, getting a hold on there and getting a read on the triple option in the first half, Kansas's ground game was completely shut down in the second half. They ended up rushing for 8 yards in the second half after putting up over 100 in the first half. So Texas's defense really comes through when it matters there. And just total yards, Texas comes up with 661. The 661 yards of total offense is the most for Texas under Steve Sarkisian. It passes by a little over 20 yards. The 639 total yards of offense they had in 2021 against Texas Tech. And that's compared to just 260 yards for Kansas. I mean, the time of possession battle and just how much Texas was able to control the ball in this game made a huge difference. Texas runs 86 plays to 46 for Kansas. Stark contrast. Texas controlled the time of possession really the entire game, almost 40 minutes of possession for Texas compared to about 18 and a half minutes for Kansas. Just insane. A big reason for that, Kansas is 0 of 10 on money downs compared to 11 of 17 for Texas. So, I'll mention some of the miscues and stuff like that for Texas a little bit later, but Texas coming up big on the money downs the way they did was one of the reasons why Kansas wasn't able to take advantage of all these Texas miscues in the first half and early in the second half. Kansas has 6 punts compared to no punts for Texas, so no action for Ryan Sanborn in this game. I just all around, Texas's defense plays really, really well. The offense converting and moving the ball just extremely well, just not punching it in again for the first 30 or 35 minutes of this game. And, I mentioned a lot about the rushing production for the offense, but, to get to 661 passing yards, you're not going to do it just on the ground. Texas comes up with 325 passing yards. Quinn Ewers goes 25 of 35 on the day. 3 total touchdowns, 2 of which were rushing. He had 45 rushing yards on the day, so he was really productive on the ground, most of that coming by way of his 30-yard rushing touchdown I believe that was there for Texas's first drive of the game. Quinn Ewers now has 5 rushing touchdowns on the season, so he's completely opening up a new phase of his game using his legs as a weapon. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into some of my post-game takeaways. Also talking about some of the studs, duds, and then just some additional points I want to talk about moving forward, heading into Red River for Texas. So, I did my post-game takeaways piece. Again, there's a lot to talk about. I kind of mentioned that already, but, Texas, usually when Texas wins or loses, I have 4 takeaways. I expanded that to 5 this week, not a huge difference, but, again, there are a lot of talking points heading into Red River. I already talked about the injuries. That was one of my takeaways that I thought was really important from this game. Again, JT Sanders and Ryan Watts, hopefully they are back next week. But one player that we have to talk about, I mentioned him earlier, is Jonathon Brooks. Again, career high, 220 rushing yards on, I believe, 17 carries, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 2 rushes for over 50 yards in this game. He was fantastic, and I can't really think of a better performance I've seen from him. Most notably, I think that Texas has kind of found their guy as the bell cow running back. I think C.J. Baxter is an excellent back. I think he's getting better every week. I really like that one-handed catch that he made on a key third down pickup for Texas. Made like 2 tacklers miss, but Texas has relied on Jonathon Brooks. This is 3 straight 100 rushing yard games for him, or 100-yard rushing games for him. He now leads the Big 12 in rushing yards. We'll see how things kind of wrap up after this week. But in those 220 rushing yards, the most that any Big 12 running back has had in a single game this season is also the most that any running back has had in a game against a ranked foe for Texas since Deontay Foreman. I think that was in 2016 against Baylor. And so, fantastic job by Jonathon Brooks. He continues to look like maybe the best running back in the Big 12. We'll see how things kind of wrap up after this week. There are some solid backs elsewhere in the conference, but he's playing out of his mind, really setting the tone on the ground for Texas. And again, I think not only do I think it's clear that he's the RB1 for Texas, but he's performing at an all Big 12 level this season. Big in the ground game, had 1 catch for 23 yards. We know at this point that he can be a threat in the receiving game as well. He has tremendous field vision. He's had a few drops here and there, but for the most part, a guy that has pretty decent hands and can come up big in that respect. The next thing I wanted to mention, I also want to give a shout out to C.J. Baxter. Again, I mentioned him, 70 yards on the ground, no touchdowns, but also had 16 yards in the receiving game. So, he's still a big part of what Texas is doing on the ground. You also saw Jaden Blue getting some carries late. So it's good to see him still getting involved, even though he had that fumble that I know kind of put him in the doghouse a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, Texas still has, I think, 3 quality backs, 2 of which are going to be consistently getting a lot of carries moving forward. And the next thing I wanted to talk about here is the receiving core. I don't think it should go unnoticed that Adonai Mitchell had the most productive game of his collegiate career today, nearly doubling his previous game high for receiving yards. 78 yards was his previous game high, and I had 141 yards on 10 catches with 1 touchdown today, averaging a little over 14 yards per catch. Had a lot of hookups with Quinn Ewers in the intermediate passing game. They looked very, very in sync. They looked the best they have this season. I know they had some nice hookups against Alabama, including that deep ball touchdown, but this was the most consistent game. Again, most productive game of Mitchell's career by far. First 100 receiving yard game of his career. And, I think that he's coming on at the exact right time. Worthy was also really good for Texas. Those two combined for over 200 receiving yards and 17 catches. Worthy didn't have any touchdowns, but was close to 100 receiving yards on the day. Had a lot of yak. But Mitchell, he was fighting hard, running really, really nice, clean routes. And none of his 10 catches, I really feel like he had to make like circus catches. I'm not saying that the catches were bad or anything like that, but Ewers was putting them on the money. And again, I'm mentioning this natural chemistry that they're showing. We always talk about Quinn Ewers liking those bigger targets in the passing game, and it's really showing now that him and Mitchell have this special chemistry. And I just think there's so much that Sark can do with Mitchell and Worthy in the passing game moving forward, knowing how in sync Ewers is with not only Mitchell but also Worthy this season. He's inching closer to his career high in receiving yards, or to setting a new career best. Came into this game with 12 catches for 180 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns, and you add in the 140 today's now at 320, so needs a little over 100 receiving yards. 426 is his previous career high during his freshman campaign at Georgia. My next takeaway that I have in this game, talking about the defense, because again, the defense was tremendous in this one. Again, holding Kansas to 0 of 10 on money down conversions is absolutely insane. Kansas ranked in the top 10 in the FBS in third down conversion rate coming into this one at 61%. Again, I know they didn't have Jalen Daniels, but they still had a lot of their other quality weapons in this game. A lot of good skill guys, good tight end in Mason Fairchild, and 2 good running backs. And Texas was really, really solid there. Kansas did get that 1 touchdown early in the game on that weird bounce where Jalen Catalon laid a big hit on Jason Bean. He fumbled. Daniel Highshaw ends up, recovering the ball, taking it into the end zone for a touchdown. He also had a bad missed tackle from Jaron Thompson on that play. But, outside of that, Texas's defense played pretty well. You had the deep ball touchdown too, so those 2 plays, erase those, and Texas's defense, especially in the second half, looks really, really good. But I think the best player for Texas's defense, hands down, not only in this game, but just in general this season, has been Jahdae Barron. Jalen Ford has been awesome. I think he had another big day, had a big tackle for loss in the first half. I thought he was playing pretty well in run defense. And covering well too, as he always does. He's the highest graded linebacker in coverage in the Big 12 this season. But Jahdae Barron, 3 massive plays in this game. I talked about this in my article, but first one being he had a defensive stop in the first half that forced a 4th down. If y'all remember that play, Jason Bean, it looked like he was going to maybe scamper to near the sideline for a 1st down. This was at the point where the game was within 1 possession. And Barron made a good read and came up with the 3rd down stop to force a critical 4th down. Kansas ended up having to punt it away. Another one, Jahdae Barron ends up capitalizing on a broken play for Kansas, gets a key tackle for loss in the first half. One of those things where you can say right place, right time for Barron, but he makes so many plays where it seems like he is right place, right time, where you eventually realize that just his football instincts and his IQ, as we well know at this point, are incredibly high, and he just knows where to be to blow up plays in the backfield. And so that was his 1 tackle for loss in the game, and I believe his only solo tackle for loss this season. And then the only turnover that Texas forced in this game, Jahdae Barron lands on a fumble. That was a really critical play in this game. Jason Bean misses it seemed like it was a little bit of a miscommunication, missed handoff on an option play between Jason Bean and Daniel Highshaw on a 4th and short, and Barron ends up recovering the fumble. Texas, gets a few yards back on that play, ends up going down driving to score, and I believe that put Texas up by 2 possessions in that game, which was key because Texas needed some momentum on offense, and I think that really got them going. But again, 3 massive plays from Jahdae Barron here. He's statistically looking pretty good this season, but I think just his impact on the game and how, just how good he's playing on a consistent basis is just so important for this defense, especially heading into Red River. So all props to him. Big game. I think he's I think he's the defensive MVP probably for Texas, although there were a lot of guys that had really solid defensive efforts. And the last thing I want to talk about, at least among my takeaways, is some of the special team stuff. I talked about this last week with Texas having the 2 muff punts, had some special team stuff to clean up. At least returning punts was fine. Texas, let some punts go, just kind of bounce and let Kansas down them, and had a couple of fair catches from Worthy, but you didn't have anywhere. Texas was pinned super deep in its own territory. Worthy, again, no muff punts, so that's good. In the way of special teams miscues, it's nice to see that was cleaned up this week. But the kicking game has issues. Bert Auburn now 9 of 14 on the season on field goal tries. He already has as many misses on field goal attempts as he had all of last season. We're only through 5 games. And on field goal attempts of 40 yards or more, he's just 2 of 6 on the season now. He was 0 of 2 on field goal attempts beyond 30 yards in this game. The 2 he knocked through were 30 yards or shorter. And so at this point, I got to think you got to give Will Stone a try here. Will Stone does the kickoffs. He's a very capable, I think he's a very capable kicker. And I know we're heading into Red River, but you can't have Bert Auburn missing these key field goals. I know that all but one of his field goal misses are from long distance. Granted, he had a miss last week that was 26 yards. He's struggling kicking the ball right now. There's no doubt about it. He was really good for Texas in the kicking game last season, and it's just not the same this year. And so Texas is going to have to find a way to clean that up. Again, these special teams miscues, you've gotten away with it because you were able to get some separation on Kansas in the second half this week, and you just faced a bad Baylor team last week that you were able to kind of beat beginning to end in that game. But OU, I don't think that's going to be the same story. You're going to need to be firing on all cylinders, including special teams. And while, the kickoff coverage looks really good and, the punting game, even though they didn't have to turn to it at all this week, has looked pretty good this season, at least in the way of punting coverage and Ryan Sanborn, the way he's performed. But, the field goal game, those miscues are going to come back to cost Texas. And this is part of a bigger picture here for Texas where you're having too many first half miscues. In the first half for Texas, you have 5 drives, all that get on the plus side of the 50. 3 of which that get into the red zone for Kansas, and you come away from those 5 drives with 13 points. Again, you don't have any punts. There was 1 interception in there. Quinn Ewers threw an interception before halftime. That, again, lucky that you kind of get away with that because I think Texas, really looked like they needed those 3 points. Texas went into the locker room at halftime with a 13-7 lead, and getting that separation by 2 scores looked like it was going to be really critical. Again, lucky that didn't matter too much, but you can't be getting 5 drives on the plus side of the 50, 3 of which are in the red zone, coming away with that few points. Kansas, they weren't moving the ball very well at all in the first half outside of 1 or 2 drives, and the fact that you're up by 6 at halftime is pretty concerning. Again, Texas executes better in the second half. You did have a long field goal attempt missed by Auburn, but outside of that, I think Texas was... And then the last drive of the game, I think Texas was perfect. I think they were, 4 touchdowns in the second half on 6 drives. So those 2 that you didn't get being the missed field goal, and then the last drive of the game where Texas just running out the clock. And so it looked better in the second half, but these miscues, you got to have them cleaned up. The red zone offense for Texas has been problematic throughout the season. It's been, again, better in the second half, but the first half, the conversions have not been there. You saw that at times against Baylor last week. You definitely saw that, during the non-con through a lot of that slate. And I think that, whether it's riding the ground game, maybe getting simpler reads for Ewers, whatever that is, you got to figure these situations out. And so that I think that was the biggest issue for Texas in this game was the miscues in the first half, maybe beyond the injuries, because obviously that is concerning moving forward. But yeah, let's go ahead and look forward to the OU game now. We'll have plenty of coverage coming up on on the site this week, obviously, and then on the YouTube channel as well. But I can't help but think coming into the OU game that, Texas has confidence. This team does look really good on both sides of the ball. We haven't seen OU play today. They play it, I believe it's, so they kicked off. I think it was about 30 minutes ago as of the recording of this video. But, OU's look good so far this season. They haven't really been tested all that much, though. They played a pretty bad Cincinnati team last week in the Big 12 opener. And then, this week they play an Iowa State team that I don't think is very good either. Probably the best team they played this season. Maybe they're like Iowa State or SMU, and so Texas will be by far the biggest competition they've had. I think Texas tested a little bit more, with Kansas this week, even without Jalen Daniels. I think a Jason Bean-led Kansas team is still better than anything that OU has faced, and then obviously the Alabama game, was a huge test, and so, I think Texas, you got to feel confident, but JT Sanders and Ryan Watts, these injuries, you got to hope for the best because Texas has been pretty healthy this season. But JT Sanders, I've said it a lot this year, and even last year too. He's the biggest mismatch among tight ends that you have in the Big 12. You can do anything with him, flex him out, line him really anywhere around the line of scrimmage. Get him involved in short screen game, intermediate passing game, or down the seams for deep passes, and you just basically pick apart any linebacker or safety that you want to. And so you got to hope he's healthy. Maybe it's just like a slight ankle sprain or something like that, and he can get back for Red River. But this is a significant injury. I have faith in Gunnar Helm, but he's just not the same weapon, obviously, that JT Sanders is in the passing game. So that's a little bit concerning moving forward. But I still love the way the defense is playing. Quinn Ewers is playing pretty good football right now. The running game is hitting its stride at the right time. And I think that this is not only a very formidable Texas team, but a very well-rounded one at that that's heading into OU next weekend. So excited for what's to come there. But again, we'll keep you updated and have plenty of coverage at the site this week. But for now, we'll enjoy this victory. Again, Texas moving to 5-0 on the season, 2-0 in Big 12 play with a 40-14 win over Kansas. That's pretty much it. Hook 'em.